Hello, YouTube! Welcome back to the channel, which we are now calling The Backstory. That's right, new name. Because we're trying to get the backstory on indie games to give a little light to indie game creation stories and a behind-the-scenes look at what it takes to make a video game. I'm once again joined by my co-host James, and today we have on Mitch from Traction Control. How are you doing?
I'm good. Yep. Thanks for having me.
Alrighty.
Glad to be back.
Yeah, so now we're actually in an interesting predicament, Mitch, because you were actually one of the people we recorded about 6 months ago before we took a break from the channel. So throughout this video, you'll see bits of us putting up a previous version of the game a number of editions ago, and so with this episode, we'll not only be able to talk about the game's creation in general, but we'll be able to talk about what it was like updating the game between now and then. So that's interesting. Alrighty. So let's get into it, just like we normally do. James, the tutorial now has tutorial messages.
Yeah, we have a tutorial now. It's better than it was. I don't think it's perfect by any means. It's still kind of, but it covers the basics, right? Before we just had.
Well, as
billboards
they'll
in the
be
level.
seeing on screen right now, the previous tutorial was just like a track that you went round and the button prompts showed up at the side of the track and you could just drive around for pretty much as long as you would like. Whereas this is a bit more handholdy.
Yeah, I mean, all of the information was there in the last tutorial, but I mean, it didn't present itself very well to players. It was tough to read too if you were zooming past it, right? So it just had there's lots of issues with it. It wasn't as effective as we wanted, and we thought that this approach was a little bit more effective.
I do very much agree.
It feels sad to have to put more handholds on the player and have it less freeing for them.
I mean, for something like a tutorial, I didn't really mind. I think what's most important is people have the tools to learn how to play the game, because the game is best enjoyed, I suppose, when you most understand the controls, right? So, I mean, like having somebody explore it on their own is fine, but you can't really expect that everybody will necessarily want to do that. So just adding a few more prompts and a few more tips, I think, really, well, I'm hoping helps, new players get familiar with the game.
Has the tutorial felt better for you, James?
Oh, much better.
You can remember how much it, how it felt last time.
Yeah, last time it was quite.
I remember you
difficult to
crashing
get
into a
hang of.
lot of walls a lot of times.
I mean, yeah, how we were looking through the footage the other day. How long did I spend just having no idea how to make it around the first corner?
I don't know, but here's a montage of all the times James crashes on the tutorial, the last one.
Yeah, I mean, to your credit too, though, like the game, the physics of the game have changed quite a bit too.
Yeah,
right?
I think so.
In making these new levels, did you learn a lot from the previous levels you had made and the feedback you got?
Yeah, absolutely. In general, we tried to make the levels a lot easier. Like we wanted to maintain the skill ceiling. Like we wanted to be able to perform really well on a level, but some of them in the past were, I think, a little bit too challenging, and the difficulty curve wasn't quite there.
What something we were just looking at is there was I remember a quote from you, and here it is.
Very few people have really been able to even get to the end, which is a problem. So I think it's too challenging, perhaps, right now. But I don't know. I don't think the solution is necessarily to make the game easier. I think it's just to make levels that aren't as challenging and are a little bit more educating to build skills that players need later on.
Right, and create a easier difficulty curve.
Yeah. Right now, it's definitely difficulty steps, and they're pretty tall steps.
But perhaps it was too difficult to have the second level in the game be such a difficulty spike.
Right. Yeah, and I don't think we've tried to make the game easier, or less punishing, I suppose, is a better word. Primarily, like in the last version, crashing was really easy and it happened all the time. So we've greatly reduced the amount of crashes, I suppose, that a player has. We've changed the way that points and scoring work to keep it easy to get boosts and and to get more points at all times.
And
yeah,
how
like
much of this was like your original vision, and because one of the things you mentioned before that I caught up on was that you set yourself an internal deadline. So how many of these changes were things you always wanted to do but ran out of time for, versus things that you discovered through early playtests?
I think the idea of like grinding on logs was always kind of something I wanted. Maybe not always, but even from early, prototypes or early stages of development, it was kind of a cool idea, I thought, but I didn't really I don't think it was an internal deadline that really restricted us from adding that feature earlier. I think it just took a little bit of time to cook in the mind to make sure it was kind of the right fit for the game, or like what things would that change. So I think as much as it's fun to work on games forever, I think the internal deadline was great because we learned a lot, I guess, about like the release process and what it means to like quote unquote finish something and send it out, and then what it means to go back and like kind of do updates, and because these are things we want to do long term for the game is keep it updated. So putting a copy out there and then being prepared to update it was something that we wanted to get started on doing.
Let's talk about the music. So there was no music in the previous version. That wasn't by choice. You always wanted music to go into the game, is that right?
There was a time when I didn't think the music was as essential as maybe I do now. When the game was mostly just about, I guess, like the more time we spent trying to get the freestyle elements of the game or kind of finalized and set, we realized that we had to kind of absorb some of that culture too, right? And you want, having music in the game kind of allows people to, I guess, in some way, like just it accents their playstyle, right? You can pick heavy rock or lo-fi music or whatever you like. So it was at some point I could have made the artistic decision not to include music, but I'm really glad that we didn't.
Was there a lot of infighting in your team as to whether you should make that decision or not?
Not really, right? Like it was mostly as soon as we were grinding on logs and trying to build a little skate park, like it seemed ridiculous not to include it. Early days, like one of our prime inspirations was Lonely Mountains Downhill, and they didn't have any music; it was just ambient noise, and I really liked that in that game. So I had this idea that we could do something similar, but I think music fits the theme of the game much better now. Top 10.
Right, so you're at the top. Is number 2 through 5, are they also members of your team?
No, like, oh, sorry. Tunel is Justin. He's the guy who's been helping me do all of the multiplayer stuff. He's like doing all the networking. And then Gabriel is our CEO. But I don't know who. Well, Better is the guy who I can't beat on Bunny Trail. And I've seen L-Dog a bunch. Yeah, so he's been up here too.
Do you have any team members not featured here?
The only one not featured is Steve. I don't know if he's got a here. Maybe not. Oh no, Steve 87. Yeah, there he is. And we recently were able to pick up a guy to help with business development. His name's Jeff. Jeff's awesome. He said he played the game, but I don't know what his handle would be.
It's last on the leaderboard.
Yeah, it'll be this guy. You know it's Big OJ.
Big OJ. You know what? Like it's not even out of the question. If you got it right, I'll let you know.
Is this the first of the medium challenges?
Yes.
Yeah.
Did you have somebody go through and appropriately judge, like, oh yeah, this is definitely medium?
Yeah, that someone was me. So
Okay, at the top
I'm not
of the
gonna
leaderboard.
I'm not gonna pretend that all of the judging is perfect. Like this one is definitely a little bit tricky. Like I did try like. Some of them are going to be wrong. That's all. Like I think that different people have different strengths and different skills at the game. Like I've definitely seen people complete challenges almost first try that I thought were like super hard in the game, and vice versa, right? Some people just struggle with one challenge; they have to do it a few extra times or whatever. So it's been kind of interesting to see, I guess, which challenges which people find difficult, and the fact that it's not exactly consistent does make ranking them a little bit trickier. But maybe maybe this could be a hard one.
It does seem that James just sucks at skateboarding. You mentioned that you've gotten like a couple of new team members. So has your dedication to this project grown over time?
Yeah. So like just for me personally, right? Like I finished school, so I didn't have to worry about that anymore. So I've been able to fire on all cylinders, so to speak, on this project. And I'm not going to say it was less important to me then, right? I just had more stuff going on. So since I guess wrapping up my education, I've been able to, kind of put both feet forward and
yeah.
Have you managed? Yeah, I suppose you would have tested them all, but you've managed to complete every challenge in the game.
Oh yeah, certainly. I would have to do it. I wouldn't say, especially when you're putting them together, right? Like the first draft isn't always that easy.
Yeah.
but you try and iron them out a little bit. But this this thing happens where like sometimes your game designer hat comes off and your game player hat goes on, and you just want to beat it for yourself. It's really great when your workflow consists mostly of playing the game. So some of them do get quite hard. This one's one of them that's like quite hard, and it can be sometimes you kind of just want to keep them, right?
Have you made any updates to the art style from when we last saw the game?
Yeah, the art style's been updated a little bit. One thing we started doing was started to be a little bit more restrictive with our color palette. Stay with these very bright colors. But we've stuck to a more bright and colorful palette. We've tried to be a little bit more restricted with the colors we use. A little bit of post-processing goes a long way, so we definitely tried to add a little bit more vibrance to keep that cartoony comic book sort of style. But we wanted to keep, I guess, the feel the same, just with some improvements. I think the trees move now. I don't think they moved before in the version we played back then. So the trees kind of wiggle in the wind a little. We've got grass. The grass moves a little when you drive over it. So we've made some improvements, but I think we've stuck to the same sort of style. I just think we're getting better at it.
I asked about the art style before. Can't remember the answer. So, why did you choose to go for cel-shaded graphics? Was that a performance issue?
It wasn't for performance reasons at the time. It was just kind of it was kind of close to launching the version that we'd played in the last interview, and somebody kind of brought up the idea of cel shading, and we tried it out, and we were all really happy with it at the time, and it's still something I think we're all really happy with. I mean, yeah, and if it helps with performance, that's great, but ultimately it was an artistic decision to do.
Right, so in the previous game you had the classic light car being the Whirligig, the heavy car being the Fox Hunter, and then the in-between car. And now you've added in the two new ones. Was it a case of you just want a heavy, medium, and light car? And then how do these new cars fit into that?
Yeah, I mean, that was a very loose idea, I guess, for the original three, was that they'd kind of be these different weight classes. But ultimately, we just kind of wanted to have a diverse range of cars, right? Just for stylistic reasons. And we've kind of brought all the cars a little bit more in line with one another, so the differences are a little bit more subtle. So I mean, like, there's some gameplay elements, I guess, that we'd want to give to players, and there's certain cars that model that nicely. So that's part of, I guess, how we choose cars. But we didn't want any car to feel like it was, unusable or anything like that. Yeah, we also added multiplayer. So now we have multiplayer lobbies that you can, like real-time lobbies that you can play with friends or other players. You can join random lobbies too. They mostly just function like the Explorer mode, but with a group, so you can complete ring challenges and muck about with your friends.
Just like with the skateboarding, was that a thing you discovered? Was that a thing that was pushed for by the audience? Or did you want to always have that in?
Multiplayer is something we've always wanted to explore in some fashion. Way back, like early days, I would have only, like, in my mind, the leaderboard was all we would really ever get to do, and that was fine. But we started playing with some more ideas, and we were able to get a multiplayer system together. So it's one of those things that, in hindsight, it's something that we're really happy we have. But before, right, it just kind of wasn't in the scope of the project. But as we've kind of got some more validation and built our own confidence with the project, we've kind of taken it upon ourselves to add some of these, deeper, more complicated features like multiplayer.
Did you find it quite complicated, adding it in?
Yeah, it's definitely a very complicated thing to get perfectly right. Our current implementation isn't perfectly right. Essentially, we're kind of just taking the positions and tracking them and sending them to other people and then representing them in game, which is pretty good. But because the game is physics-based, it's not perfect, right? So I guess what I'm saying is, like, it has been complicated up to this point, but we are planning to take it kind of a step further to improve that sort of stuff. So it will get more complicated.
Is it tough to choose which area of the game to focus on? Like, oh, we got to improve multiplayer, but we also want to make more levels, we also want to make more cars.
Yeah, it can be tough. I guess with Sorry, I guess when you asked this question, I thought you meant, for me personally, and I was going to say no, it's great having all this stuff to work on, but as a company and for the game,
Yeah.
it can be a little bit more challenging, I suppose, just because each little thing can take a whole lot of time. Like you might think that you can put a level together and call it 2 or 3 weeks, and like maybe that sounds pretty good, but if you want to do 5 levels, that's so many weeks, right? Like, and it's so we do have to be a little bit calculated and conservative when it comes to adding new content and features. But the nice thing too is that in terms of mechanics, we have a lot of refining to do, but not a whole lot of adding to do. Like most of the mechanics we want in the game are there, so it's easy now to decide to say build more content for the game in terms of levels and cars, because we can just kind of throw those in, and it's yeah. I mean, there are other features we want to look into. One of the big ones we want to look into is sort of asynchronous racing, so you can race other people's recordings and ghosts. I guess another thing is like we want to do more progression system stuff, so that you actually have to unlock certain levels or certain cars and that kind of thing. But for the most part, right, like we're in a sort of content type phase.
How are you finding the Samurai, James?
Very, very
I noticed before
fragile.
there was one ledge.
I know, I
where
had to jump off it, because it just
just driving along the track caused it to crash.
It's low. Yeah, I mean the Samurai is our newest car, so it's definitely the most
problematic.
new. So there's a lot of edges to be polished off with the Samurai. We've been trying to buff it slowly over time. Like it used to be even worse for boost management. It used to not really drift very well.
Used to spawn in and die.
Yeah, so I mean, there's definitely still some refining to do. Maybe it could be a little bit tougher.
You don't want to make it overpowered.
Maybe just
Or maybe
the front end needs to be a little tougher.
Yeah, I
Just
guess like
front
the
end.
thing with the Samurai is like on paper, I thought it would be like an insanely fast bullet. And I was like looking at the stats, and I was looking at the other car's stats, and I was like, yeah, this is going to be broken. And then it wasn't really broken. So I tried to buff it a little bit, and it's still kind of not broken.
Keep pushing it
So-
until it breaks.
Yeah, keep pushing it until it's the only car you see, I guess. But we wanted to, it's always nice to buff cars. It's never that fun to nerf stuff. So yeah, it might be a little bit underpowered at the moment, but it is certainly fast, although it is fragile.
Have you ever wanted to include like an easy car so that players who are less able, for instance, might be able to race around in that car? And if somebody did pick up the car and get a really good time with it, then you'd be able to go, oh, they're using the Samurai. That's why they were able to get a really good time. And have
Yeah.
different difficulties of cars.
Yeah, I think like it might be good to formalize something like that, right? Like the Samurai, it is a hard car. We haven't made necessarily an easy car, so to speak, but the bore is really tough and it won't crash. But it's also not necessarily the fastest or the most agile car. I think the easiest car is probably the Azimuth, just because it's been around the longest. Like
it's
it's
the
had the most rounds of polish. Like
It's a very
It's-
balanced experience.
yeah, it's in some sense like the intended way to play, but having more varieties of cars, having cars that have high risk, high reward sort of mechanics are a lot more fun. It's great to be able to make that choice. But yeah, like getting that balance right can definitely be tough, and it's something we're always working on.
The one thing
Now
I
we're in new
remember about the
territory.
previous build is that some of the tracks were really winding. Now they seem a bit more straightforward. Was that a concession to make?
Yeah, I mean, some of the winding before was just too much, right? Like it was.
Once you got outside the bunny trail, it got kind of ridiculous.
Like
in
who
places.
makes a road like this?
Yeah, even this one is kind of back to its windy roots. But yeah, like I really enjoyed those paths because I was like pretty good at drifting in the game, right? Like I'd spent so much time with it, like so I really I thought those paths were just fun.
I do remember a quote from you being like,
But yeah, the path always comes first. I always make sure that I can at least beat the level as just a path. I feel like if I can beat the level as just a path with no ground or anything to catch you, then it's probably fair game.
then it was good enough to put track around it.
Yeah, and that was an idea that I thought was good, right? But even still, like it kind of compounds your problem, right? Because like what ends up happening is you just get better at driving, and like your levels don't really get any more balanced that way. So I don't make levels that way anymore. Now I try and be a little bit more holistic about each kind of individual space.
Another thing that you mentioned is that you said, I made levels this way, but I really should do it in a more holistic fashion. So,
Did I? Good. Yeah, if you could include that clip and this one, that'd be excellent. I wish that when I was doing level design, I would have taken a more holistic approach instead of sort of developing it piece by piece by saying like, oh, I'll make this little piece of track and then kind of just driving it as I'm creating it over and over again and iterating until I'm happy with it. But,
so what holistic things have you picked up on?
well, I guess like I don't model it kind of piece by piece that way. I'll start with bigger shapes and getting the ground and other stuff in place first, and then the path mostly comes later. I mean, there's still like the path is also usually the first thing to get finished, but it's not what I start with anymore.
You definitely feel that's resulted in better levels overall.
I definitely think so, especially with the ones that we went back and redesigned. Like Bunny Trail in specific, I think benefited a lot from that approach. It's tougher to say what a temple would have looked like built the other way for the other levels. At least I can say that.
Platforming than races.
Yeah, exactly. So I think I think it was the right call to sort of take a step back before designing a level and try and take it piece by piece.
4th.
Not bad,
with
and we have more than
88
10
resets.
records. That's pretty
And-
good.
And there's a samurai. I'm the
wait,
only samurai in the top 10.
Hell yeah, dude. And somebody else, Giraffe, has got 75, and they did it in a Fox Hunter. So you're still in good shape.
No one's even completed it in the samurai before.
But
No, it's just
you're
you.
not level 20, not rank 20, which is why I was wrong about that.
No, I was ranked 4.
Rank 4.
Wow.
Well done.
I guess I'll get a little bit of footage of the park.
Oh. That's a boring question. Do you find that playtesters use the roll left and roll right function more than I did personally?
Honestly, I thought that was I remember, that was one of the things that you guys said that I actually thought was really on point. Was you were like, oh, you put these on face buttons, like you clearly think they're important, and I was like, oh yeah, like, I do.
Do you
Which
not think they're
maybe it
important?
sounds silly, right? That like I didn't really think about it quite so bluntly, but like you pointed it out to me that like that might not be what most people would expect, I guess. So I mean, I can't tell you if your viewers thought that was an exciting question, but I was like, wow, that's
Wow.
amazing.
I don't have any viewers, but yeah. You said you took your buttons from Rocket League and just put them in this game, and that's why the face buttons were as they were.
Yeah, and that's that's still true today. That's still the default. I mean, you can remap them. I think you could remap them then too. But yeah, like that was really the depth of the thought process for me. It was like, this is what I want the controls to be. In some sense, I kind of built the game around that control scheme. So yeah, when you pointed that out, that like that's kind of uncommon, it's kind of an aha moment for me in some way.
Did our chat with you help you make the game at all?
I mean, I've given at least one example where it kind of did, right? Like
Feedback's always helpful.
feedback's always helpful. Yeah, I mean, sure, yeah, and then sometimes it's tough to do that kind of on your own, right? Or to do that effectively on your own. So it's always good to just talk about the project and kind of where it's at and why we're building it, and that that kind of stuff always provides clarity.
So we're going to wrap it up here. Thank you again for coming on, Mitch. I hope you had a good time for the second time that you've been on our show.
No, it's my pleasure. I appreciate you guys having me on. It's always a pleasure talking to you guys about the game.
We had to get you back after. We've got to give you something for the time you spent 6 months ago. So down below, you'll see links to support the game, to play it yourself, and to support us at the channel here at The Backstory if you want. And we'll catch you in the next video, YouTube. But I might add that as the thing. Still recording if there's something you'd like to add.